Gauteng Industrial Development Zone hosted an investment drive, a mere stone's throw away from the OR Tambo Special Economic Zone. Key stakeholders and SMEs were invited to attend and listen in on a panel of experts as they shared information on the competitiveness of this SEZ as a circular economy destination and engaged the panelists in a Q&A session. We spoke to Lovemore Mushayanyama, Regional Manager for KZN and Hinterland at Transnet, about intermodal connectivity and Transnet's potential partnership with OR Tambo SEZ.
I think as Transnet, there are areas of synergies that can also benefit the SEZ, which is to have this intermodal infrastructure that can assist investors to have the best of both worlds, so that they are not reliant on one mode of infrastructure to export or import their commodities. So my view is that I think that conversation in Transnet or any other player in that space that promotes that connectedness of infrastructure to provide not options, but it's actually to provide, in fact, yes, it is providing viable options that can give investors an opportunity to see a wider spectrum, that in as much as I can add freight within a couple of minutes, but I also have the opportunity to manufacture maybe heavy stuff in a different land parcel that can be transported by rail in no time through the ports of South Africa, and they can be railed through the Transnet infrastructure. So it's very, very important that the components are at some point marketed as a whole, especially to big investors.
So what would you say is the challenge in that?
Look, I wouldn't say it's a challenge. It's just a conversation. It obviously takes... the infrastructure is already connected to a certain degree, but there might be a remote possibility that there's need for additional funding to connect. But obviously for you to connect, you connect when there's an opportunity for investment that can use that infrastructure. So I think it's a balance between the investor needs that have been identified or those that have been targeted, as well as the infrastructure, because you plant infrastructure, you don't just plant infrastructure, you must plant with usage in mind to say what is it going to serve, if it's going to serve its purpose. So my view is that even these conversations, they are not new. I think they are taking place, but I'm saying there's nothing wrong in saying we can accelerate the discussions, identify the different role players who can participate in that, give meaningful input, come up with solid action plan, timelines that can be defined to say this is how we need to connect that intermodal connectedness. And it's actually beyond just that. Even the SEZ as well, the OR Tambo SEZ, one of the things you'd find is that we've got different SEZs in the country. In as much as there's an opportunity for them to compete, but there's also an opportunity to cooperate on certain investment initiatives. And that, for it to happen, like if you take an IDZ located in Saldanha Bay or located in Port Elizabeth, and one that is here, the OR Tambo SEZ, if there's an opportunity to cooperate, it requires infrastructure to collapse those distances, you see. And that's where I think your Transnet can become a very useful vehicle to collapse those distances and expose viability and practicality to the investors across the globe.
If we were to shift the funding required, how would that look like, or what would that look like? Shifting this funding to expand this infrastructure and getting these investors involved, and also for the small businesses down the value chain.
Yeah, it's very difficult to say, because if you're a small business, you're obviously trying to grow to become a big business. So it means you might still be saddled with a lot of basic requirements, I think, in order to grow your business. So I would say in terms of the funding requirements, it's difficult to say, in the absence of a research, practical research that you can look at to say, how should it be directed towards, which areas and so on. But what I could say broadly is to say at the moment, I'm just saying this is a gut feeling. It's not based on any empirical evidence. My gut feeling is that we've got existing infrastructure, but depending on the investor requirements that are being targeted, if you're targeting automotive, for example, then I think the funding requirements will be dictated by their requirements. You look at the existing infrastructure and say, is it adequate or sufficient to address their requirements in the medium to long term, because you want investment in the long term. Then if there are those gaps where you may need to provide additional or complementary infrastructure, then you plow that with a view to ensure that the investor feels, it's not about feeling comfortable, but has a convincing business case to buy into your location as a viable business location.